All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get us started so we can be mindful of everyone's time, knowing that it's the lunch hour and we all have things probably to get back to. But I'm really excited to have you all here and to welcome our guests from CANIE, so our Climate Action Network for International Educators. My name is Kylie Blount. I'm the Southern District Chair down here in San Diego, and actually joining today from Chicago, so just all over the place. We're really excited. I had some conversations with Adrienne and Ine, and really just wanted to learn more about this. I feel like, climate change and climate action have all become very popular topics in our field of international education. But I think, myself personally, I have felt a little, like I don't really know some of the terms and what all can really be done as an international educator to combat some of this. And so some of the great conversations that I started having with them, I thought, wow, this would be something so helpful to share with our colleagues and share with our districts. And so after chatting with the folks up in the Northern District, we thought, oh, this would be such a great opportunity to collaborate. So here we are. We're really excited to be collaborating and chatting. And I'm going to turn it over to Adrienne and Amy to really get things rolling. But thank you for being here. And we're excited to have this conversation together.
Thank you so much. So we're gonna go ahead and just jump right into it. Amy, Ine, and I are very excited to be here with you. So today I will start by defining some terms related to environmental sustainability and climate action. Then Ine will provide an overview of CANIE and some of our activities. Amy will then take us through an activity to help identify your unique talents and where those might lie. Then we're going to close up by sharing some ways that you can get involved. So I am Adrienne Fusek. I have been in the field of international ed since 2004. I was at San Diego State University for 14 years, most recently as the Director of International Programs and Partnerships. And in March, I left my position at SDSU to focus my energies on helping to decarbonize the field. It's a hard decision, but working through it. So I'm a founding board member at CANIE, and together with Ine, we co-chair the Climate Justice Working Group, and Amy's a part of that as well. I recently accepted membership into Alethea Global Consulting Cooperative, which is a worker co-op based in Vancouver, BC. And there I serve as the Director of Equity Strategies. So some of the sustainability initiatives that I've led include the Forum on Education Abroad's guidelines, aligning the standards of good practice for education abroad with the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, the CANIE Accord, and the Glasgow Paper. And I'll turn it over to Amy.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Amy Marcus. I'm joining from Northern California. I serve as Secretary for the Americas chapter of CANIE, and I'm also a member of the Climate Justice Working Group that Ine and Adrienne chair. And so I worked in international and higher education for about 9 years. I was in language programs, institutional partnerships, student advising, and program management. And throughout those years, I knew that the field of international ed was contributing to climate change. And for a long time, I was way too intimidated to get involved with climate action. I thought, well, I'm not a scientist, right? Like, who's going to take me seriously? What do I have to contribute? But then over the past year or so, I started really digging into climate change and solutions more, reading a lot more, listening to a whole bunch more podcasts, and following CANIE actually. And I learned that I don't have to be a total expert to join in and contribute. So working with CANIE has really given me the confidence to contribute in the ways I can, supporting this work, and to be in community with others who believe in the value of international ed and also the importance of minimizing climate change. So I realized I did use past tense for used to work in international ed, and I'm now working at HubSpot, which is a tech company based off of the East Coast. And I'm a senior program manager for accreditations there, working on work with our solutions partner agencies. And I'll pass it off to Ine.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ine Williams, and I'm joining you from my off-grid location in Arizona. So I stopped by a local library to get some good internet. Hopefully it'll keep me on hold here today. I'm actually a career changer. I was originally a scientist. So I was part of the molecular cellular developmental biology group and worked with biotech and biopharmaceutical in the corporate arena. And it was actually that environment that was the catalyst for me switching into international education. It was so global, and yet I had not been prepared well for that in college, not from anything that the college did. It was more my own efforts. So I essentially started out just working as a resident director in an international house at San Jose State when I was going to grad school to change my career. And that transitioned into becoming an advisor, eventually culminating in opportunities to serve as a director of international student scholar services at Long Beach State. Spend some time abroad in Shanghai, China, working at an international school there, and then also come back to the Cal State system. My last position was at San Diego State as the Associate Director of Study Abroad. So like you've heard as a theme, a lot of people are transitioning to different types of roles. In my case, the pandemic hit my family pretty hard, right in smack in the middle of it, like many other families. So I made the decision to leave, go to Arizona and focus on getting my family's everything back together. So everybody's now in a good space, and I'm working on trying to put together my own small business that's related back to academics, academic coaching, international education, consulting, those types of things. So other than that background, I guess the one other thing I'd want to mention to you is that CANIE enabled me to learn about the climate reality leadership core training. And that's enabled me to get involved in a lot more ways, dealing with climate through my community, and then also becoming a mentor to a cohort of other people that went through the training after me. So that's been a really wonderful way to take my work with CANIE and add another personal level to it.
Thank you so much. So let's go ahead and start by defining some of the terms that you may have heard in the news about climate change. So we'll just start with the UNFCCC, which stands for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So it's a treaty that was entered into force in 1994 and now has near universal membership with 197 parties. So those parties are nations, countries. So the goal of the convention is to prevent dangerous human interference with the climate system. So that was in 1994, or 28 years ago. The Conference of the Parties, or COP, is the decision-making body of the convention. All parties to the convention are represented at an annual conference where they review the convention's implementation. So the 21st session of COP, or COP21, took place in Paris in 2015. And for the first time ever, every country agreed to work together to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees and aim for 1.5 degrees, to adapt to the impacts of a changing climate and to make money available to deliver on these aims. So the Paris Agreement is a legally binding international treaty on climate change, and it was adopted by 196 parties and entered into force in November 2016. The IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and it's the UN's body for assessing the science related to climate change, and it has over 195 member countries. So thousands of people all over the globe, maybe even faculty at your universities, contribute to the work of the IPCC by assessing the thousands of scientific papers published every year and providing comprehensive summaries of what is known about the drivers of climate change, its impacts, future risks, and how adaptation and mitigation can reduce those risks. So we at CANIE consider the IPCC reports to be the source of truth on climate science. And so you're going to hear about, we're going to refer to them often. So this illustrates annual global temperatures from 1850 to 2017. The color of each stripe represents the temperatures of a single year, ordered from earliest available data to 2017. All other information was removed, so the changes in the temperature can be seen simply and undeniably. So recall that the convention was ratified in 1994, which is 28 years ago, and the Paris Agreement in 2015, 7 years ago. So not pictured here are the last 5 years, but the trend of increasing global temperature rise is continuing. So you may have seen in the news that 2020 was one of the top 3 warmest years ever recorded. 2021 was one of the top 6 warmest years. So we're in deep trouble, and that's why CANIE is focused on decarbonizing international education to reduce our contribution to this planetary crisis. So, as Kylie mentioned, there's a lot of talk in the field about sustainability, but what is it exactly, and is it the same as climate action? So what you see here are the SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals. So they were born out of the UN Sustainable Development Summit in New York, which took place in 2015, alongside the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So the SDGs are as old as the Paris Agreement. So the SDGs are meant to be integrated and indivisible and build a more equitable, peaceful, livable world for everyone. So you can see there the different areas that are addressed by each SDG. So the initial plan was to achieve them by 2030. So we have 7 years left, and we're not even close. And in fact, many areas such as climate action or SDG 13 are actually more dire than they were in 2015. So each of the 17 SDGs falls into one of 3 dimensions of sustainable development. So the dimensions are economic, social, and environmental. So here's another way of looking at the SDGs that illustrates the economic, social, and environmental dimensions. So starting from the top, we know that a healthy economy depends on a healthy society, as COVID has poignantly demonstrated, and a healthy society depends on a healthy biosphere. So you see that SDG 17, Partnership for the Goals, is cutting through all other SDGs, since partnership and collaboration are key to addressing all SDGs. So in fact, international partnerships and collaboration are essential to addressing these SDGs. So if the SDGs are meant to be integrated and indivisible, why does CANIE, the Climate Action Network for International Educators, focus primarily on SDG 13? Well, there's good reason for that. According to the IPCC's 6th assessment report, which is the most recent one, we have 3 years to reverse course. In fact, the co-chair of Working Group 3, the group responsible for the last part of the report, said, "It's now or never if we want to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. Without immediate and deep emissions reductions across all sectors, it'll be impossible." So international ed is a sector, and that's where CANIE comes in to try to help with this. So really, no issue is more urgent. So as a threat multiplier, the climate crisis is causing a whole host of other issues like climate migration, food systems crashing, irreparable damage to infrastructure, and the list goes on and on. So failure to curb our emissions and stop global temperature rise undermines our efforts to address all other SDGs. So at CANIE, we focus on reducing our field's negative climate impacts and increasing our positive climate impacts. You've probably heard the term carbon footprint, which, by the way, was coined by a brilliant marketing team hired by BP to shift blame from the fossil fuel industry onto the consumer. The carbon footprint represents the measure of emissions from an individual organization's actions that contribute to global temperature rise. So carbon footprints within and across societies are incredibly inequitable. For example, when we look at consumption and the associated greenhouse gas emissions, the richest 10% globally are responsible for 52% of global consumption, and the remaining 90% of people are responsible for the other 48%. So not surprisingly, the effects of climate change are disproportionately caused by the wealthy and disproportionately impact Black, Brown, Indigenous, and low-income communities, or those who contribute the least. So the opposite of the carbon footprint is the carbon handprint, which represents our positive climate impacts. So that could look like embedding climate literacy into all student programming, advising students on the least carbon intensive forms of travel, reducing business travel by air, and many other options. So in our roles as citizens, investors, consumers, role models, and professionals, there's a lot we can do to tilt the balance toward decarbonization. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ine, who will tell you more about CANIE and how it's created a supportive network to help international education professionals navigate all of this. So over to you, Ine.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. So who and what exactly is CANIE? Let's start with the name. Climate Action Network for International Educators. So it's for international educators, it's action oriented. It's actually an incorporated association in Victoria, Australia. We're entirely volunteer based. It's grassroots. We've been around for maybe only 2 years now, since about late 2019. And it was started by a handful of international education practitioners from around the world. So our leaders and our members are colleagues just like you. We're just happen to be practitioners who are from a diverse area within the industry, who saw a need for our sector to really step up and try to address the climate crisis, including recognizing our industry's contributions to climate change and to climate injustice. So our mission is essentially to mobilize the full power of our network, the international education global community, to address the climate emergency and to transform how we're educating, how we're collaborating and advocating for future generations of students. So we're committed to providing accessible and practical solutions, resources that are going to support international education practitioners to reduce emissions, but also build a more sustainable and carbon conscious sector. Our values actually reflect this belief that international educators should really take on the climate issues as a shared responsibility. So it's a way to ensure that climate solutions advance justice, equity, and human rights. And we support this in part by not having any fees associated with CANIE. We don't charge for any of our events or for being a member or for any resources. And that's been really important to us. But we are starting small and we're starting to grow as well. In these 2 short years that we've had, which have been in the middle of the pandemic, we've grown dramatically. We're hosting global virtual summits. We're doing climate justice focused events. We had the inaugural COP26 Climate Action Week, and that included the Leaders Forum, which was what we believe is the first meeting of bringing all these different leaders from the international education sector together to make commitments on how we can address the climate crisis. And these collaborative efforts have led to the establishment of chapters in CANIE. So we now have the CANIE Europe chapter, CANIE Oceania chapter. Those started in 2021. And then most recently, the Americas chapter was developed. And that's what the chapter that all 3 of us are part of. So the Americas region is representing Canada, Latin America, the Caribbean, and the USA. And we're really working hard to expand and represent all global areas. So if you know anyone in different regions that you think might be interested in being involved in CANIE, we'd be very interested in helping support them develop a regional chapter for areas that we aren't already representing. I'm going to go ahead and make sure you have a link to the CANIE website. So in case you need to refer to that, you'll have a way to do that. But our growth and our actions are also they've been starting to lead to recognition in the field, which has been a nice surprise for our small group. So we have about, I would say, 2,000 members or so, if you include members, volunteers, and supporters around the world. So we are continuing to grow and evolve, and we're really happy that we have a chance to talk to you all through NAFSA as the regional members. So we're small, but we're mighty, and our efforts were most recently recognized as selected finalists for 2 categories in the Pioneer Awards, which is the only global awards that celebrate innovation and achievement across the whole of the international education industry. So we were finalists for the Pioneer of the Year and Sustainability International Impact Award. So we take this kind of recognition as an indicator that the industry is recognizing the importance of climate action in our sector, but also it's a great honor and I think a motivator for our grassroots team of people to be recognized that we're doing something right. So let's see. The one other thing I wanted to, or a few other things I want to mention is when we're addressing the climate crisis, sometimes people say, well, why is it so important for our field to be doing that? Adrienne mentioned earlier the IPCC report as kind of our standard, something that we refer back to. And one of the first things they said in the 2021 report was reminding us that it's a code red. This is an urgent action needed to stop us from kind of reaching a point of no return. And our vision is to reimagine the international education sector in that role, recognize and act on this urgent need that we have for all of us to take a more environmentally sustainable and regenerative approach to global education and to reach that net zero emissions by 2030. So we're trying to minimize harm by reducing the emissions that are associated with student and staff mobility, for example, but also we're really seeking to harness that climate emergency as an opportunity to make a positive and just impact on students, educators, partners, home and host communities. So the big question is, how are we going to do that? And that's where sometimes it can feel a little daunting. So CANIE got together as an organization and said, well, let's figure it out. Let's connect with some people and try to hash that out. And so we came up with 3 focus areas for CANIE to guide our actions. We have an area of advocacy and policy where we're going to work to influence climate policy across our sector and advocate for that shared, bold commitment to climate action by all international education stakeholders and leaders. And the Climate Action Week that we had in this past November was one of our first I'd say, key events to get those leaders together. We also have the focus of education and connection, where we're going to gather, or we already are, gather, develop, and share data, resources, and research to educate practitioners in their role, the role that we can play in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and transforming our sector to just more sustainable operating models. And then finally, we have this area of operational sustainability. So one of the biggest issues is we're talking about this today. This is not an issue that is going to be solved today. It's literally going to be an ongoing piece to address. So we have to build and grow CANIE into an organization that can be sustained and scaled into the future in order to have these efforts be able to continue. And the people behind this work are part of what we call the CANIE Global Board as kind of the key starting point. That's where the strategy is built and the focus is found and developed to connect and drive chapter, working group, or other project groups across all of these 3 focus areas I just mentioned. The Global Board is right now, Adrienne and I are both part of that, and we serve a 2-year term. We meet regularly about once a month. And one of the things that happened when the chapters were developed is we wanted to make sure that chapter representation was reflected in the board. So every chapter president or designee comes to the meetings as well. So we always make sure we have chapter perspectives, regional perspectives, and involved in any areas of discussion or action. And then as NAFSA 12 region members, your team would be part of the Americas team if you were to join CANIE. So our current leadership, Amy is the secretary. She represents the US in the Americas chapter. Luke Bruce is the VP and he represents Canada. And then we have Sebastian Fernandez, who is from Argentina, and he's our president. So that's our key team. But we also use Padlet as a way to get to know our general membership of each chapter. Since we're 100% remote, most of us have never met like everybody in this group. We have all these virtual efforts, and Padlet just creates another way for us to introduce ourselves. It's a little less formal, maybe more personal, and aside from social media or other meetings. And we're going to go ahead and drop a link to that Padlet in the chat. So if you'd like to see a little bit more about our membership as it's currently reflected. So now you know a little bit more about CANIE. And so I thought it might be helpful to just very briefly highlight some of the key benefits that we've expressed, that we've experienced in our membership and involvement in this free network. So here's 3 of the many that exist of benefits of being involved with CANIE. Number 1, I would say, and this has been a topic that's come up many, many times now across the board, is being part of a network, a group, can help to address the anxiety that comes sometimes with dealing with big issues. So you're not alone. So I mentioned earlier, CANIE values this taking charge and addressing this as a shared responsibility. So you have this network of colleagues, you have all these people working together, creating safe spaces to have hard conversations that are helping to reduce some of the stress that you might feel when you're tackling such a huge issue, especially when it's an issue that causes disproportionate impacts at home and around the globe. So having this network of action-oriented colleagues helps you to continue to move forward, even when it's feels difficult, no matter how big or how small your steps are, no matter how big the challenge is. And that in turn can really help to balance out that the emotional piece, the emotional elements that a lot of people struggle to wrap their heads around when they're dealing with something difficult, some very important but difficult issues. And number two, I would say, is access to free activities and resources. I mean, my gosh, it's not very often in our field that we hear that something is free. So it's kind of nice to have a space that you know is addressing something important and not creating like a gate that says, well, yeah, you want to get this, you have to get into it first. So you can go to global summits, regional summits, the COP26 week, which is going to be every November, aligned with the COP26 event that takes place globally in a different country every year. We have a podcast, newsletters that highlights different things going on in the field. And we also are building an online, free online resource library. And then in addition, we have webinars and workshop as another part of that. So that's a second piece that's a benefit. And lastly, I'll just share that, at least in my experience, but a lot of people have said this, being part of CANIE has really helped to apply both personal and professional actions and skills in relation to the climate crisis. So everything from building leadership opportunities by being part of the global board or a working group or a project group. You can also either build or extend skills you already have. So for example, we have all these virtual events. You have to plan, organize, lead, support, market. And some people have a lot of skills across all those areas. Some people need to build them or want to, and it's a really safe space to do that. And then another piece to that area is there's a lot of discussions going on. We have a Slack space where we do a lot of our action-oriented things. And we also have a LinkedIn discussion platform. So those are areas to also have continued conversations with colleagues to learn about relevant resources. And I learned about the Climate Reality Leadership Corps through my involvement in CANIE. So I went to that free training, and now I'm a mentor to a whole new group of people. And that's been really amazing experience for me. So we'll go ahead and share that in the chat, so you know if you're interested how to get involved with accessing that free channel, that training, excuse me. So where do you fit into all this? So Amy is going to help take you on a journey to help you find your path of climate action.
Thank you, Ine. I love that intro. So excited to speak with you all today. So I don't know about you, but last month's Earth Day events were super exciting, right? But also a little bit overwhelming. After weeks of climate-related events, news articles, social media posts, we thought it would be helpful to spend some time reflecting on where we fit into the climate action puzzle and how we can take action that has an impact while also bringing us energy and joy. And considering that CANIE is all about climate action and building a network, we wanted to help you explore what climate action might look like for you and to give you the space to discuss these ideas in community. So the research shows that one of the best ways to manage feelings of eco-anxiety and overwhelm is to redirect that energy into action, right? And to discuss with others in community. And we actually did this activity as a group during our monthly CANIE Americas chapter meeting last week, and it was such a great experience. So I'm really excited to share it with you all today as well. So I learned about this exercise sometime last year from my favorite podcast, How to Save a Planet. One of the show's co-hosts, Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, is a marine biologist and climate activist, and developed the Climate Action Venn diagram as a way for individuals to identify how they can contribute to climate solutions in the ways that work best for them. So there are a few rationales behind the climate Venn diagram. The climate crisis is a complex challenge, which means that it will require efforts from all different industries and perspectives. What's great about that is that it takes all kinds, right? Everyone can contribute in their own way, leveraging their strengths, and truly make a difference. The climate crisis is also going to take some time to solve. So we need to do things that bring us joy in order to make it through the long haul. Not only that, but we'll actually have the greatest impact if we're doing things that we truly enjoy doing, right? Doesn't sound so bad. So as you'll see on the slide there, this exercise is very similar to the Japanese concept of ikigai, only simplified and climate focused. So by asking yourself a series of questions and looking at the points of connection and overlap You can identify how you, as the amazing, beautifully unique individuals that you are, can take climate action in the way that's right for you. So you could spend hours on this exercise, but today we'll just spend about 2 to 3 minutes on each question, and then 10 minutes in breakout rooms to share and crowdsource ideas. So no worries for this first part, you're welcome to stay off camera. It's just reflections, and then later in the breakout rooms, ideally you would come off camera if you're able. So if you can, grab a sheet of paper and a pen or pencil, or open up a digital file to draw in, whichever works best for you. We're going to draw 3 big circles that overlap, like you see on the screen. Although, to be honest, when I first did it, my circles were super wonky, so I ended up just doing bullet-pointed lists. Totally fine. And then I'll read you each of the 3 questions, and we'll aim for about 2 minutes for each one. I'll also share my own examples along the way to give you an idea of kind of how it came together for me when I did it a number of months ago. So in your first circle or list, you guys ready? You need another minute to get paper or file? I think we're doing okay. Okay, I'm gonna dive in. In your first circle or list, write your answers to the following question. What brings you joy? Or what gets you up in the morning? Write down everything that comes to mind. This can be in your personal or professional life. The idea here is that if we don't cultivate joy and feed our souls, we'll just end up totally burnt out. So for me, I'll share that this list started with learning languages, reading, writing, espresso, and talking to people. So take about 2 minutes to write down everything that comes to mind. All right, feel free to keep adding to it as we go along if something else occurs to you. For the second question, oopsies, lights going off while I'm in this funky room that I'm not normally in. What are your special skills, network, resources, or magic? What are you good at? We all have some special strength or resource that we can leverage, so write them all down. Again, don't limit yourself to professional skills. I'll share that my list started with planning, researching, facilitating, explaining. It can be all sorts of things. So take another 2 minutes. All right, shall we move to the third question? And I apologize for using the phrase you guys. I know it's gendered and it's a habit I'm trying to kick. So our third question is, what is the work that needs doing? What are the climate and environmental justice solutions that need support? This one, could we switch slides, please? Yeah, thank you. This one can feel overwhelming because there's so many. So the key here is to pick a few that are particularly interesting to you or just relevant to your experience or your lifestyle. So you can check out Project Drawdown's list of solutions when you tackle this more at home, if you need some inspiration. For me, with this question, my list started with managing eco-anxiety, tackling consumerism, and removing the intimidation factor from climate action. So again, take about 2 minutes to think through those. All right, so on the same slide, take a few minutes to look across the 3 sections that you've written down and try to identify any points of connection or overlap. This part will probably take the longest, so no worries. For today, we'll just take about 2 minutes. I'll also share some of my initial takeaways. When I compared my list, I identified a few possibilities: facilitating workshops, running a book club, training folks on climate science and solutions, and more. And we've jumped to the next slide where you can get a peek of my not so pretty Venn diagram, just to show you that it really doesn't need to be pretty, and that's okay. So take a couple of minutes to look across your sections and see if you can make any connections, and then we'll have time in breakout rooms to bounce some ideas off of each other. All right, so I think that was a little less than a minute, but I think I'm itching for you all to get into some rooms and to bounce some ideas off each other. And so we're going to send you into breakout rooms, and we're going to share, if we go to the next slide, I have a couple of sort of discussion topics for you to kind of get you started. Feel free to share what you put down on your list, crowdsource insights and connections. So think about maybe what themes are emerging for you, what connections might we draw between your circles, and which areas need more reflection. So head on in there and we'll see you in about 10 minutes. Awesome. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had some good, useful conversations in your breakout rooms. I encourage you to revisit your Venn diagrams at home, build them out a bit further, maybe discuss it with colleagues or friends, family, and see where it goes from there. And if you want to, you could share your final versions back with us, either in the Slack group or email me, put it on social. It'd be so fun to see. I think, so I wanted to share basically that this is just one of the many ways that CANIE tries to support international educators in taking climate action, in connecting with others in the field. It's one of the many reasons why I've really enjoyed CANIE so far. And even better is that CANIE is still evolving and growing, like Ine was saying earlier. So you could do any of the activities you identified today or identified down the line with CANIE. I mentioned that I like facilitating and explaining, and through CANIE, I get to do workshops like this. I got to help present a carbon offset session recently, and it's just been such a joy. So really quickly, as we wrap up, we'll share a few different ways to get involved. Ine went into the details earlier, but just a reminder that you can be a full-on volunteer and help run events or be on committees, but you can also just be a member and just join events once in a while, join our monthly meetings as a chapter. Very, very low commitment. It's not really work unless you choose to pick that. So super easy. We have a really great resource library and recordings of past events on our website. We encourage you to head over to the website to sign up for newsletters and sign up for our monthly meetings, join a working group or committee if you so choose. And then on the final slide, we've just got our social media. Please join us there. We also have a Slack group, which I don't think I prepared the link to, but we'll share that out for sure with you all. So please join us, ask us any questions. We do have a couple of minutes if you had any questions right now before we all head back to our days.
I'm curious, Amy, what do you think is like I don't know, just like one small thing that we could all start doing? Obviously, we each have our different strengths, right? And we just kind of worked through that. So we have some things to think about. But, we were talking about, it's an overwhelming topic, right? And everyone might be walking away still thinking, oh gosh, there's so much to be done. But what's the small thing that gives you hope? Or, what little key takeaway can we focus on that's positive and we can take with us?
I would bet Adrienne and Ine have really great answers to this too. My first answer is honestly building out your Venn diagram. I think that once you really do that cross-checking and dig a little deeper into some of those things that pique your interest, it helps give you direction and a little bit of peace of mind because you have somewhere you're going and you have some concrete directions to take. That would be my recommendation.
I'll just add to that, and I think Amy mentioned it earlier. Action is the antidote to despair. What I covered in the presentation was heavy and kind of scary, and so it's easy to kind of be paralyzed by that. And so by taking action, doing something, no matter how small, it kind of brings back sort of that sense of, okay, I can do this. And especially if you have a network, a really supportive network of people who are doing it together, I think that is really just makes all the difference in the world. So, I would say just get involved with CANIE or another network. If there's something else out there that suits you better, by all means, just do something.
And I'll just echo that. To me, the biggest strength in addressing any issue, not just climate, right, is finding your people, finding your community. And that helps you feel less overwhelmed when it comes time to okay, what can I do? You don't have to always know exactly what to do. There may be a collective group of heads coming together to figure something out, or someone else is already doing something and you can join. So that's why I really like the idea of a community whether it's a CANIE community, whether it's the community you're already part of and you build a space in your community for these types of things. And then, or whether it's outside of the professional space, right? And you start out personally and then you translate that into how you could do something professionally. Like I never have owned a car and I really love public transit and alternative transit. And I noticed that people where I worked all drove. So they never thought about public transit. So I asked, can we start to bring the public transit representatives to our campus to help international students that come, all of the study abroad alumni who come back and have spent all this semester, a year abroad using all this public transit in different countries, and start to normalize alternative transit. Bicycling, can we work with the Bicycle Coalition? These types of things. And nobody had been talking about that at the time in my institutions. So I think those types of personal joys can easily translate sometime into your work if you want it to, right? So definitely community. That's a big one.
Well, thank you to those of you who stuck around 2 minutes past the hour. We really appreciated this time with you. Feel free to reach out to any of us if you want to get involved, or just go ahead and head over to the CANIE website and sign up there. Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Kylie and Crystal, for inviting us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.